This is our sixth season, that and Bob initiated this back at the time of the pandemic to say we should be doing something anyway. And he came up with this idea and really initiated it. And so we've been going ever since with this. And it's been 9 sessions a year, like an academic calendar from September to May. And we're now in session 6 of 9. So and we have a veteran from the Steel City of Pittsburgh, uh, Vince Ciaramella. I have to I have to pause a minute when I say that because I have relatives with a very similar name.
They didn't change it on Ellis Island's paperwork. They just, shoved them through to keep it.
And Vince is going to be talking tonight about a very interesting. Everything he does has been around the Pittsburgh area, and I like to think of him as Mr. Pittsburgh. he's probably a lot more than that, though, and I know he is. But tonight he'll be doing a presentation called "Two Short Weeks Under the Sun," and it's the Pittsburgh Keystones and the National Colored Baseball League of 1887. And that's a particular year that's in my heart because there was a very, very important game in 1887 that drew the color line. So it's in Newark, New Jersey. So I can relate to that. And Bob is going to give you just a couple of ground rules for our presentation, and then Vince will get started. Okay.
Well, we've got Vince has his PowerPoint, which we'll be putting up shortly, but he won't be able to respond to any questions. And for those of you that are new, we use the chat if you want to put a comment or a question in, and we will address those to the speaker at the end of his presentation. And if you just run your cursor down to the bottom of that black screen, somewhere down there should be chat. Click on that and a little box will come up on the bottom corner, right-hand corner, and you can type in comments and whatnot. If you don't have that at the bottom, just move to the right where it says more. It's a little circle with 3 dots in it, and the chat will be in there. Let me introduce Vince, a Pittsburgh native who has been deeply involved in all aspects of the area's 19th century sports history. Which is why we have him work so much for us. He's been a regular speaker at the speaker series. He's also authored 10 books and over a dozen bioproject essays for SABR. He's been a regular presenter here the last several years, and we welcome him back to present, as Peter said, 2 short weeks under the sun, the Pittsburgh Keystones and the National Colored Baseball League of 1887. Vince, if you'll bring your slides up now, we'll see if we can get those on the screen for everybody.
Yep, got to make them full screen. Hey, give me 1 second. Make the slideshow. All right. Pull it back up.
Did you hit the?
Yep. Got it. You guys all see it?
Yeah.
Good. All right.
All right. If you for those of you, if you wish to make a don't have the little slideshows of attendees on the right or in the gallery, just hit view at the top, click side by side speaker, and you'll just get Vince on the side there as he presents and goes through his slides. Vince, it's all yours.
All right, guys. thanks a bunch for having me. Obviously, you can all hear me. We're good.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. All right, so yeah, thanks for having me here. And this is my third 19th century speaker series, and I was kind of feeling like Troy McClure from The Simpsons. Like, hi, I'm Vince Ciaramella. You might remember me from such 19th century topics as death by seawater, the Tom O'Brien story, and the guy from Alaska last year, Charlie Fisher. I can't remember what I called that one, but this year, I've been really excited because I'm getting to present a topic that it's been an ongoing research project for me since 2021-ish, around there. And really what you're going to see today is just kind of where I'm at this point. I eventually plan on writing a book about this league and the Keystones in general. The working title is 2 Weeks Under the Sun, the Pittsburgh Keystones and the National Colored League of 1887. That could change, though, by the time it goes to print. So as oh, by the way, I'm a high school teacher by trade. I teach online. So this may seem a little like lesson planish, but that's what I do. I always like to put my objectives on the screen and kind of give you an idea of what's going to be going on today. So first, we're going to discuss the birth of the National Color League. Then we're going to discuss the men who made up the Pittsburgh Keystones. And then lastly, discuss the history of the team's time in the National Color League. And then just a little bit beyond, all the way up into almost the turn of the 20th century. So lots to do today. And let's get started. So before we begin the actual talk, I want to throw two things out. Oh, my goodness. That's my fault. Hang on. I hit the admit people into the room, and then I think it let's see, share. Why is this not sharing now? Can you guys see it again? You guys can see it?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can see it on there. I'll take care of any lead admissions.
All right, cool. Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, I didn't realize I was going to do that. No, I lost it. Oh, there it is. Oh, okay. It's back. All right. So anyway, that's the objectives for this topic, but I wanted to throw out two pieces of little caveats about this. So the first thing I need to make clear is the name of the league itself fluctuates in the sources. So if you start to research yourself, you're going to start seeing that it's called either the National Colored Baseball League, their NCBL, or the National Colored League, or the League of Colored Baseball Clubs. Choice A is I believe is the official name of it, the National Colored Baseball League. But you'll see in the sources, though, National Colored League seems to be the one you'll find the most in most articles. So we're just going to go with that. It's also less to say as well, the National Colored League. So the other thing I'd like to put out there is there is a lack of individual photographs, team photos, memorabilia. This whole league almost seems to exist in the historical vapors. It's very hard to get a hold of, and grasp. There is a little bit out there, but not much. So this presentation may lack a little bit in the visual department. And so I do apologize in advance. Also, if the information seems thin, that's because there currently isn't any out there. So the Keystones, who I'm most interested in, I've written two bios that have been published through the SABR Bio Project. The third one is actually going to come out this week. When I made this, it was still kind of in the pipeline. So you're going to get a sneak preview of something that hasn't come out yet. So as the years move on, though, I'm going to be researching this more, but there is kind of a stumbling block with this team, which I'll get to in a little bit. So over the years, you'll see more, but for now, that's where we're at. So one question that I'd like, or one fact I'd like to put out there is, and I didn't know this when I first started researching this, I just assumed that the Keystones in this league were the first attempt at an all-black baseball league. And then I found out, no. The actual first attempt at an all-black baseball league was the Southern League of Colored Baseballists. There's a really great article published by SABR back in 1974 by Bill Plott. I hope I'm saying his name right. That talks about that. They predate the National Colored Baseball League by about a year or two. So it's not super far back, but they do technically get the honors of being the first all-black baseball league attempt at it. But from the article that I read in SABR, the primary sources are very thin. I did a little bit on my own, just looking around. I didn't find a lot either. But honestly, for this topic, I didn't really go too deep in it because I've got way more going on with my projects. So maybe some intrepid young writer might want to take up the mantle on this one. And we're what now? 1974. I just turned 48. We're over half a century that this needs spruced up a little bit. So maybe somebody out there can do that. Our story begins October of 1886 with a man named Walter S. Brown. Brown is one of the guys I have been researching, but I haven't been able to really flesh out a really proper bio of him. First of all, when was he born? Sometime in and around 1857. Baseball rep, seam heads. My research, it seems to be in and around 1857. He was born somewhere in Pennsylvania, according to the 1860 census record. Here's the problem with Walter S. Brown. His name is really common. So when I started researching him, I'm one of those people, I've got my own method to my madness. I like to start at the very beginning of their lives, and then move forward. I found a lot of Walter Browns that were born in Pittsburgh in and around 1857. So as I started digging for him, I realized, oh my goodness, this guy is going to be a real pain. Maybe I'll put him off to the end. So I have a little folder on my computer here with some information about him, but he's going to be my last guy that I researched for this team. I know Andy Tarek, who's in the audience tonight, is probably a little disappointed because this is Andy's guy right here. But Andy, I will get to it at some point. So I did find some conflicting information about him. His racial background is a little bit in question, and I'm not sure if I got the right person. So I'm going to throw out there. On some documents, I found he's listed as a Negro. Some I found him listed as a mulatto, and others I found him listed as white. I really need to sit down and kind of really focus on, okay, do I have any incorrect Walter Browns in the mix? And it does happen from time to time. You get baseball players with very similar names or managers, and their records sometimes get tied in with either other baseball players or complete strangers. That's another story for another day. But so in my research, I sadly have not come across a photo of Brown just yet. Well, I don't want to get too far ahead. He's been in kind of it's kind of like trying to hold on to water. It's very hard to get an idea of anything about his past right now, or find anything where I can find a relative maybe and reach out and see if they have anything, but nothing has come up yet. So he's on my list of research. Maybe in the next year or two, I'll have him out, but I have done a little work about into his, obviously the league he created. So on October 2nd, 1886, the Lawrence Daily Journal reports that, it's the first mention of the league. So the 1887 league begins its life in the fall of 1886. That's the earliest I found it mentioned. So Walter Brown was living in Pittsburgh, and again, he may have been a native of Pittsburgh. The only thing I found is he was born in Pennsylvania, but it's a big state, so who knows? Walter Brown was living in Pittsburgh, and according to Jerry Mallory, was a news agent. I'm sorry, Jerry Malloy. Excuse me, Jerry Malloy. He was a news agent at the Pittsburgh Central Hotel, as well as the Smoky City's correspondent for the Cleveland Gazette, which was a prominent African-American newspaper of its day. So a lot of this research, this early research into Walter Brown, Jerry Malloy, did a lot of the heavy lifting. So, tip my cap to Jerry on that one. Brown later on, it wasn't just him. It was Brown and some other businessmen. They came together. They decided to create this league. And as I believe Pete said it, if I'm mistaken, if it wasn't you, I apologize. Talking about, in 1887, the color berry is the color lines being drawn. African Americans have been now chased out of Major League Baseball, so they're going to have to create their own leagues to practice their craft and be able to take to the diamond. Brown became the league president and secretary, and he was also the owner of the league's flagship team, which were the Pittsburgh Keystones. Now, the Keystones, get to them in a second. So over the winter of 1886 and into the early months of 1887, there was a lot of back and forth between different backers and potential teams. One of the teams that Brown really wanted to have join the league was the Cuban Giants, but they declined. They didn't want to give up their where they were at to join the league, and they were kind of a little skeptical on its longevity and possible ability to make money. So they declined, but Brown, pressed forward. He wasn't deterred. He had this, a vision and a plan for this particular league. And by, I'm sorry, I should say the late winter of 1886 had the league finalized. So the league consisted of 8 teams originally. You had the Pittsburgh Keystones, Philadelphia Pythians, the Lord Baltimores. I love that name. The Boston Resolute. Now, I have seen it plural, the Boston Resolutes, but Resolute seems to be the preferred name. The Louisville Fall City team, the New York Gorhams, the Cincinnati Browns, and the Washington Capital Cities. So 8 teams are going to make up this circuit of this league. However, out of the gate, 2 of the teams never saw action. Those were the Cincinnati Browns and the Washington Capital Cities. They never suited up for a game. Both teams lacked the financial backing to really just get off the ground. So the league was already minus 2 teams before the season really got under the way. So I want to pause here for a second because really, we're going to follow the Keystones, and they didn't play a lot of games, and this talk will be pretty short if I just kind of focus in on them now. I kind of want to pause for the league and just talk about the players themselves that made up the Keystones. And as the guy said here, I do focus heavily on Pittsburgh. That's where I'm from, and that's what interests me. I do kind of travel here and there for other people, but Pittsburgh is I love writing about my city's sports teams and its history, especially the 19th century stuff. So back in 2021, the pandemic, 2020, I got back into researching baseball. I always liked baseball as a kid. The Pirates of the 80s were my team. And of course, then the Buccos became the Suckos for a while, and I kind of stopped paying attention. So during the pandemic, I watched Ken Burns' baseball because, well, quite frankly, really wasn't much to do. And long story short, that kind of kicked off my love for baseball history. About 2021, I'm digging past the obvious stuff here in Pittsburgh, and I'm trying to dig down into some, really obscure stuff. I really like cup of coffee players, obscure players that really have been kind of forgotten over the century or so. I came across the Pittsburgh Keystones, and I thought, my goodness, I've never heard of this before. This is like really cool. How did a team only play for 2 weeks? And who played for them? Well, again, this is when my passion for digging up this team really kicked in. And the stumbling block is one of the big challenges in researching the Pittsburgh Keystones really is the lack of information about the players themselves. So I naively thought that probably seems to be a baseball book about everybody under the sun, or at least an online entry somewhere that fleshes out some of these players. Come to find out, no, there really almost is absolutely nothing written about this team. There's some stuff on SABR, little mentions here and there. So I really began researching them about I guess it's really now 5 years ago, and it's been a tough uphill climb. So I want to show you one of the reasons why. Here is the roster for the 1887 Keystones from the Seamheads website. So this is the roster from that year. If you look here on the left, you'll see the ages of just 6 players: Wally Walker, Dave Allen, Saul White, Frank Miller, Willie Sandard, and Harvey Roy. Everybody else, Henry Gant, William Wilson, Ben Gross, Sam Jackson, John Brady, Charlie Bell, and Charles Griffin. There's nothing. So I thought, well, okay, well, I'm sure when I start researching these guys, getting into the primary sources and newspapers, there were sports writers of the day, might drop a hint here or there, like, oh, Henry Gant, the Virginia baseball player. And okay, I can look in Virginia for him. There's almost nothing about these guys. I don't know if the writers just assumed that everybody knew where they were from or their background, or, they just, were a little lazy or they just didn't care. I don't know. So when I got to Seamheads, when I went to the Seamheads website, they're great for information, and I was thinking, oh, they're going to have a birth date or a date of their passing, maybe some other information. Seamheads has nothing about them. Baseball Ref, nothing about them. My own research, going through the primary sources, I can find their names and box scores and maybe little write-ups here and there about how they did in a game, but no biographical information. So what I'm getting at is there's a very limited amount of players that I can really research at this time. I have been looking into Henry Gant, and I've found 2 Henry Gants. Again, there's no birth date or death date anywhere to find. And I haven't found anything in the articles that say he was from, from this state or that state or whatever. But I did find 2 Henry Gants that were about the right age. One was born in Alabama and one was born in North Carolina. So he's kind of on my radar next to really dig into and see if I can find something on him. I don't know. It may be, a wild goose chase. I mean, he could be from Pittsburgh for all I know, and I'm looking in the wrong spot. The rest of them, like Charlie Bell, Brady, I haven't even gotten there yet. So I will get to them eventually. But I have written about 3 of these players. So sadly, most of the men on this team, I do think, though, are probably going to remain somewhat in the shadows unless something surfaces where I'm able to, access biographical information or demographic information, something that I can start at least, the hunt on. So what I have for you now is all that I have for the team. As I said, common names, lack of information, that's the big stumbling block that I've run into. But let's turn it to on a positive note. There is stuff out there about some of the players. And probably the most famous player on this team is King Solomon Saul White. I did not write his bio for SABR, by the way. Somebody else did, and it's very good. I highly enjoyed it. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Saul White was an Ohio-born African-American professional baseball player, became a manager, an executive, and a historian. He was posthumously inducted to the National Baseball Hall of Fame. I don't know if you can see this because I'm not used to using this type. We use a Zoom program called Class for Zoom. It's a little different, but Saul White wrote a book. I don't know if you can see this or not. It's called Saul White's History of Colored Baseball and Other Documents on the Early Black Game, 1886-1936. So that's another great resource as well for you folks that are into 19th century baseball, or if you're into the early history of the Negro Leagues, or just kind of curious. It's a really good book. And you can get that on like Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or you can get it just about anywhere. So King Solomon Saul White is probably the most well-known of all the players on that team, but he's not the only famous player on that team. Another Buckeye State alumni is Weldy Walker. And this is Weldy right here. Again, I did not write Weldy's bio for SABR, but Weldy Walker, if you don't know him, he was born in Steubenville, Ohio in 1860, and he was the brother of Moses Fleetwood Walker. If that name rings a bell, Fleetwood Walker was the first African-American in Major League Baseball. Weldy was number 2. He was also an entrepreneur and a civil rights activist. You can visit, I have gone there in Steubenville, Ohio. Fleetwood Walker, or Moses Fleetwood Walker, and Weldy Walker are buried right next to each other in the same cemetery. So if you're a weirdo like me who likes to kind of frequent graveyards like Gomez Adams, you can go there and check them out. They're also buried not far from Woodrow Wilson's grandparents. So if you like history, you can park your car and walk between between the both. And there's all their baseball players buried there as well. But that's a different story for a different day. Now I'm going to tell you about some of the players that I researched. And we're going to start off with a guy named Dave Allen. For the next few slots, you're going to see either tombstones or cemetery gates, and I'll explain why you're seeing that as well. But that marker there that was placed by the Josh Gibson Foundation, the Josh Gibson Memorial Markers Project, which I'm a part of. My wife, son, and I wrote a book during the pandemic called Greats in the Graveyard, which we documented anybody to do with anything with Major League Baseball during the pandemic. We went to grave cemeteries, walked the roads, saved me from becoming Jack Torrance from The Shining. A little nod to the Colorado guy in the audience. But no, we had a good time. But we found about 25 Negro League players in unmarked graves, including Dave Allen. So with the Josh Gibson Foundation, we started marking these graves through the generous donations of folks, giving their hard-earned money to this project. And happy to say we've got 23 in right now out of the 25. Two were probably not. I'm sorry. We have 20. Excuse me, 20. We have two more, and two are probably not going to go in. I got the numbers wrong, but it's around there. We're almost done. So Dave Allen was kind of an interesting guy because he was the first of the 19th century guys that I wrote about. It was actually the second guy that I wrote about who we gave a grave marker to. And Allen was I found something really interesting about him. Well, first of all, death certificates. If for any of you would-be researchers out there, death certificates are a great source of information. But the problem with death certificates is they're not filled out by the person that died. they're really dependent on somebody else. And a lot of people sometimes don't put the correct information on there. So when I started researching David Allen, I saw in his death certificate he was born in Madison, Virginia. Okay, well, the town Madison or the county, like where? So I started researching him, couldn't find him. Although I did find a Davy Allen born in 1856 in the town of North River, Virginia, which is about 60 miles to the west of Madison County. I thought, okay, well, that's doable. Let's go with that trail. What I found next was really shocking because I never expected to find this in my baseball research, but I found Davy Allen in the 1858 slave registry. I'm sorry, excuse me, the 1860 slave registry in Virginia. His father and owner was a guy named David Allen. His mother was, of course, a slave. And then I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, well, let's follow this thread here. I mean, this could be a dead end. Well, after emancipation, I found him later on in the 1870s, living in near Winchester, Virginia, up that way. And then I found him in the 1880 census living in Kentucky, and then he vanishes. Well, my David Allen in Pittsburgh just kind of springs out of nowhere. There's no David Allen in Pittsburgh ever, or prior to that. And thought, well, there's got to be a connection between the two. There's got to be. This just seems too right. Anyway, I did find the connection. All of David Allen's children were born in Kentucky. And they were born in around like the 1880s, and there was even one born after the baseball. He looks like he split his time for a bit between Kentucky and Pennsylvania, but he passed away here in Pennsylvania in 1931. So I thought that was a pretty interesting little. I never thought I'd find that, and to this day, I believe he's only the second known former enslaved person to be in Major League Baseball, with William White being the other one. He's the only other former slave to play Major League Ball. The next guy is Willie Standard, and there's no tombstone. This is the gates to the cemetery he's at. I wrote about him. He was the second Keystone that I wrote about, and was born in 1867 in Washington, D.C. And Standard, he was a long-time player for the Keystones, even extending well into the 1890s, almost to the end. By all means, Standard really just had a very normal run-of-the-mill life, got married, had kids, worked a job on a farm during the offseason as a cook. He had coached later after baseball and all. It was one of the what do they call the athletic club. The athletic club's down in the south side of Pittsburgh. It was an all-black baseball squad at one of the athletic clubs in the south side of Pittsburgh. Again, a pretty normal life. Passed away in 1936. Sadly, the cemetery is not being very cooperative with the information. In fact, the guy who owns the cemetery is a little bit bonkers. The company that we work with for the headstones will not put a stone in that cemetery. The owner has, they sign contracts. They'll lay a foundation. They'll come back the next day. The foundation's ripped up, and the owner's demanding more money. So we called another company, and they said they won't deal with him. So even if we did find him, we can't really put a stone in for him. He's most likely lost. The cemetery itself is in very, very poor condition. Found photos of going back to 2012, and the cemetery today, back to 2012, the woods have taken over most of it, and it's all thickets of wild rose and whatever. And it's a mixed cemetery, meaning there are whites and blacks buried there, but at this time period, there usually was segregated parts to cemeteries. You see them on old maps, they call them the colored sections. He's probably in one of those, and he's probably now in the woods, unmarked, and probably lost. Maybe he'll turn up someday. Who knows? As long as this guy owns the cemetery, I probably doubt we'll get a marker in there for him. Harvey Roy was the guy that I told you was in the pipeline for the SABR Bio project. It's through the Bio project now, and he will be out whenever Rory posts them down, in the next couple days or so. And this is Peninsula Cemetery in Wheeling, West Virginia. It's not too far from where the Nailers play hockey. It's I advise you, if you do go here for whatever reason, if it strikes your fancy, keep your head on a swivel. It's not the best area. There's also a huge homeless camp I've seen it a couple times there, and I found needles and other paraphernalia in and around the area. So just, be mindful, go during the daylight hours or when, maybe earlier in the day. I just would be careful with him. Anyway, Harvey Roy was really interesting guy. He was born in DC on October 1st, 1867. His dad's name was John. And really, that's all I could find about him, his prior pre-baseball life. A lot of African Americans during the 19th century, their personal records are very sparse for obvious reasons. There wasn't a lot of documentation. So he kind of just appears on the Keystone team 4 games into the season. His pre-Keystone life is beyond murky. I have no idea where he played ball. I've looked in DC, Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio. I can't find him anywhere. So where he played, maybe he played under another name for all I know, which is quite possible, but he's kind of a ghost. He just appears during the 4th game of the Keystone season, actually the 4th and 5th game. He left baseball after the Wheeling, the Keystones moved to Wheeling about 1889, and he left the team in 1890 to pursue a career as a professional gambler. I did find, this is not on here, but he actually dabbled in gambling while playing for the Keystones and was arrested in Pittsburgh because he ran a gambling house up on Wiley Avenue while he was playing for the Keystones in 1888. Again, he left the team. There's no reason why. Can't really figure out why he left. Maybe he just wanted to pursue gambling. And then his life gets a little rocky. I'll leave you to read that. I don't want to spoil anything, but he died very young at the age of 35, and he's maybe buried in Peninsula Cemetery. That's where his death certificate says. But however, in the 1960s, the state of West Virginia put part of the interstate through the cemetery, so they disinterred 2,500 bodies and moved them to other cemeteries, whatever that means. There's no record of if he was moved or not, and there are no records. They were just dumped. So he may still be in Peninsula Cemetery, or he may have been moved. Frank Miller, another one of our Josh Gibson recipients, is only a couple feet from my great-great-grandfather, the boxer Jack McClellan. So when I visit my great-great-grandfather, I always come over and clean off Frank as well, because he's just right over a couple feet over. And Frank I don't really know much about Frank. Frank's on my list to write about as well. From the small amount of research that I've done, Miller is on the Keystones well into the 1890s. He shows up a lot. But it does appear, according to the Negro League Encyclopedia, that he played for the Trenton Cuban Giants, New York Gorhams, the Cuban Giants, and the Cuban X-Giants. What I will say, though, is Frank Miller is a common name. I'm not putting down the encyclopedia. I only have the 1994 edition, and I have found a lot of errors in it. Now, they didn't have the resources that I have today with like newspapers.com and Ancestry, so I'm not, slinging mud at them, but I really have to get a newer edition, and I really got to dig in and see if this is the right Frank Miller and not a Frank Miller, from somewhere else. And I have found that it's been the case. A friend of mine, Samuel Richardson, his father was a Negro League pitcher for the Crawfords. And when I found him at the encyclopedia, said he played for the Bacharachs. I was like, huh, that would be an incredible baseball story, because when he played for the Bacharachs, you've been a whole 2 years old, and unless he's like some kind of like Doogie Howser of the mound, or the box. It wasn't him. So I do need to look into Frank Miller. Again, the problem with Frank Miller, as you can probably guess, is his name is going to be pretty tough goings when I start digging in. It can be very easy to find another Frank Miller and go off on a wild goose chase. But, I love doing this stuff, and this is what I like to do at night. So, I'll be working on this, I'm sure, before the end of the year. As I said, he was one of the recipients of the Josh Gibson Foundation. The last guy I'm going to talk about is Walter Brown. This is Minersville Cemetery on the hill in Pittsburgh's Hill District. It's on Herring Hill. And Brown, again, I don't know much about his personal life yet. I do know that after the Keystones came to an end, he never seemed to re-enter the baseball world. I've researched the Keystones, and it seems after 1887, he's just cut ties with them. He's no longer mentioned in any articles. He just kind of just up and vanishes. Jerry Mallory did find that he was last seen in September of 1888, sorting mail as a railroad postal clerk between Pittsburgh and New York. Unfortunately, he also died at a very young age from Bright's disease, which seems to be it's a kidney ailment, and it seemed to be pretty common in the latter part of the 19th century. My guess is the water in the area, because I found a lot of people in Pittsburgh, including my personal relatives, that have died of Bright's disease in and around that same time. So, Pittsburgh wasn't the most healthiest of environments during that time period. So, or maybe there's no connection to it at all, but I got to think that probably played a role in it. He's buried in Minersville Cemetery in an unmarked grave. We don't know where he's buried. The cemetery, unfortunately, in 1967 was heavily vandalized. Some person or persons came in, ripped up over 100 headstones and threw them over a hill. The records were lost for quite a long period of time. It became a derelict cemetery. Kids used to sled ride down it, and it's just now been reclaimed by the Lutheran Synod of Pittsburgh, and they're trying to place stuff back. We are going to put something there for him regardless. If we can't find him, we're going to put like a marker or a stone that says within these hallowed grounds lies Walter Brown, but we haven't gotten there just yet. Also, there's another baseball player there too, Piano Mover Smith, if you know him. He's a white ball player, played for the White Sox, but he's also in an unmarked grave as well. So that's enough death tour of this one. So I hope I didn't scare most of you away. Let's get back to baseball, folks. So now you know some of the players. Let's talk about the season of the Keystones. So the Keystones actually had they weren't there on opening day. They came on day 2 on May 6th, 1887. I would have loved to have been there, because I could see it in my mind's eye. I'm from the area. I know exactly what they're talking about. So about 3:15 p.m., the American Cornet Band led a parade down, the street coming to Recreation Park. From all the articles, there was people, dancing, and it was a really like jubilant event. People were just having a good time. There was a guy named Ajax Jones that was there, and my friend is a local historian. His name is Jaquay Edward Carter. Ajax Jones he worked for the mayor's office, and there's one of those little kind of history kind of snafus where the one mayor left, but the new mayor wasn't sworn in yet. So Ajax held the keys to the city for like 3 days. So Jaquay was like, did the research. He's like, well, technically our first black mayor wasn't Ed Gainey, it was a guy named Ajax Jones from 1887. So, one of those cool finds. And Ajax Jones is is in attendance at this game, one of about 1,000 folks who were there. And the Keystones took on the Gorham on the second day. But here's the thing, as much jubilation and happiness was involved in this event. I'm sure Walter Brown being there is probably just like over the moon happy that, his league is taking off. He's got a huge turnout. People seem interested. The league already was in trouble by day 2. It was starting to crumble. I'll get to that in a second. So if you ever come to Pittsburgh and you want to see where Recreation Park was, this is what's there today, this access information protected site. We're not getting in there. I've talked to Len Martin. If you've ever been to Pittsburgh and seen those, he likes to beautify the parking lots of the north side with baseball, with baseball stuff. And he's talked about, maybe putting a sign there, or maybe getting the owner to paint Saul White and Pud Galvin, because Pud Galvin played there as well. If you know him, he was the first guy that pitched 300 winning games. So, Len, again, he does all these really cool things. He puts baseball plates, commemorating, events like the World Series, Roberto Clemente. He can't get in there. I'm not getting in there. This is also the site, and that's Andy. I got to bring this up because, I'd be remiss if I didn't. This is also the site supposedly where Fred Carroll, the pitcher for the Alleghenies, buried his dead monkey under home plate. It's a story that drives baseball players crazy, or baseball historians crazy, because it's not true, but it's just taken on a life of its own. And so my son and I were going out we took this photo. He was really young at the time. He was like 7. I told him that, there's a ghost of a monkey that haunts the break room there. He's like, really? I'm like, oh, yeah, why not? So anyway, this is where Recreation Park was. This is where the Cornet Band was. This is where all that was going down. This is where the Keystones played. Like I said, it would be kind of cool if they do get a mural of Saul White and put Galvin there. I think it would be really cool. And since it's private property, it's really just up to the owner. We don't have to clear anything with the city or anything. But that remains to be seen. So on May 7th, the second game against the Gorhams was called due to rain. So this is where it's just the whole league starts to unravel. The next team up for the Keystones was the Boston Resolute on May 9th and 10th, but the game was postponed because the Resolute, the team, got stuck in Louisville, Kentucky. How did they get stuck in Kentucky? Well, it's a long story, but due to weather-related game cancellations, the cost of train travel increasing via the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, the team had no money to pay for their transportation back home. Their whole goal was to come down, play a game, get money, pay for tickets, go to the next, and so on and so on and so on. They got stuck in Kentucky and they had to work their way home. Again, when I do write a book eventually, I will flesh that out a little bit more, but suffice to say, all the games with the Resolutes, they didn't happen. The Keystones wouldn't play again until May 11th, when they went out to Philadelphia to take on the Pythians. Now, this is where my guy Harvey Roy joins the team. I said he kind of just appears out of nowhere, kind of like a genie. He's now playing for the team. There's no let's welcome Harvey Roy to the team, former player for XYZ. No, the writers in the thing just, he's in the box score, just kind of like he's always been there. No welcome, no nothing. Anyway, they lose the first game 9-8. The following day, they beat the Pit. They turn it around, win 19-3. And really, for Harvey Roy, that was his entire abbreviated, career in the major leagues. That was it, because he does not appear any more Keystone games until well after the league crumbles. So the Keystones played their final 4 games against the Lord Baltimores at home, with the last game being played on May 19th. The Keystones would win out the league with 3 wins and 4 losses. And by June, it was announced that the league was no more. So what happened? What caused this league to kind of just like crash and burn like the Hindenburg? Well, It started with the Interstate Commerce Act of 1887, and it made railroad travel more expensive, revoking the reduced group rates normally enjoyed by traveling baseball teams. Even white teams at that time were finding it very hard to pay for travel, and they were used to this reduced group rate, and now they're paying a ton more money, and that's cutting into their profit margin. This upstart league, that had razor thin backing, it just wasn't going to work. Sadly, too, at this time, and if you are a student of 19th century baseball, which I'm assuming most of you are, there's like 1,000 leagues out there. Everybody's competing for your dollar, and a wallet only has so much cash in it. So the league itself was underfunded and couldn't afford costs, and there was honestly a general lack of interest caused by the league, caused the league to fold prematurely. I don't know. I mean, could things have gone a different way if the other two teams were still on the roster? Maybe if there was a little bit more planning ahead, maybe instead of starting in 1886 and then moving right into it in 1887, maybe there could have been a couple of years of planning. They could have gotten more backing or more money. It's speculation at this point. Who knows? But it folded. But that really wasn't the end of the Keystones. The Keystones would soldier on as an independent team well until at least 1899. That's the latest research that I found, that they played at least up until almost the turn of the 20th century. Now, there is a second Keystone team in Pittsburgh, but they're not related, just related in name only. I'll get to them in a minute. One of the things I found that I do want to talk about the Keystones, I found this article. It's like, wow, if I could jump in a time machine and go back to a specific game in Pittsburgh history, I know people would go back to see Mazeroski's home run or Roberto Clemente's, debut, or maybe going back to the 1909 World Series. I want to see this game. And it's not really played by anybody of consequence. It's just the Keystones and the Standard Oil team from the south side of Pittsburgh. But why would I want to see this game? Well, this game was played on New Year's Day in 1892. And if you know Pittsburgh weather, New Year's Day this year, we were in the negatives. It was cold. Actually, we had plans. My wife and son and I had plans to go hiking. We had to scrub that because where we were going hiking had, I think, between 18 to 20 inches of snow. The roads had not been plowed. I have a Nissan Kicks, which would end up, literally getting stuck like in about not even a dusting of snow. So we had to call it off. So having a baseball game on New Year's Day just blew my mind in this city. So what did I find? Well, again, at Exposition Park, the Keystones, with the majority of their 1887 lineup, took on the team from Standard Oil from the south side of Pittsburgh. And what really made this whole story just kind of come alive in my mind, in the theater of my mind, was, look, these teams are playing. They're coming down on horse-drawn carriages. Cannons are firing. You got to remember, Allegheny City at this time, what we call Pittsburgh's North Side, was a separate city. It doesn't say where the cannons were firing. Was they firing on the Pittsburgh side or the Allegheny side? We don't know, but there was cannons booming across the river. Again, across the river could mean, they were in Pittsburgh firing, or, the sound was traveling across the river. It could be either one. But anyway, the teams played 6 innings of baseball on New Year's Day, 1887. But it was almost like a Monty Python skit. It couldn't have been worse conditions. So they're at Exposition Park right now, which is right on the river. The pitch, where the pitcher's box is kind of described as an island surrounded by water, and the baselines are swamps. Balls are getting, when it gets hit, it digs right in the mud. So they're digging up mud with a baseball. They eventually called it. Everybody seemed to have a good time. And it was kind of more of a, just a friendly game. Nobody took it too seriously. Sadly, the Keystones lost, 8-3. But again, in my mind's eye, I would love to go to see this game. It just, I've got the article right here, at least part of it. If you want to, just email me and I'll send you the whole thing. You can read it for yourself. But yeah, that's definitely something cool. Another thing about the Keystones is I want to mention is 1889, this young guy named Pete Hill, maybe you've heard of him, future Hall of Famer, is in Pittsburgh and is playing for the Keystones in 1889. So the city just named a street after him this past summer. So there's Pete Hill Way now So if you do come to Pittsburgh and you want to do some baseball history, you get your photo in front of Pete Hill Way. It's pretty cool. Anyway, exactly when this incarnation of the Keystones disbanded, I haven't found yet. Maybe somebody already in the audience knows. I just haven't gotten that far yet. The new team appears in the 1920s. They're called the Keystones. There are players like Willis Moody's on the team, Sellers Hall, Ernest Gooden. They're playing in the Hill District at the first Black owned and operated baseball park, and it's not Greenleaf Field, it's Central Amusement Park, which predates Greenleaf Field, and it's now just a hillside with weeds, and there's no marker for it. But these guys, this 1920s incarnation of the Keystones, took on guys like Rube Foster and a lot of greats from the the first incarnation of the Negro Leagues. But really, though, however, this Keystone team right here really only shares a name with the team from 1887. And as I said, as of 2026, there are no historical markers for this pioneering 1887 team anywhere. Maybe down the line there will be. Maybe I'll try to get one of the state historic markers. I'm doing one right now for a silent film actress. It's a real pain in the butt to do, and it's a lot of paperwork. But once I get through this first one, maybe the next one won't be as bad. But right now, it's a slog. And I wanted to say thank you to the late Jerry Mallory, Ken Mars, Mark, and John Thorne for all their work in these obscure leagues and players. And really without their pioneering research, guys like me would still be, trying to dig down and find, even the most basic of information. They did a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot of the digging for us. And I want to thank, the 19th century speaker series. This is my third year in a row. Hopefully next year I can come back and do another talk for you guys. I've got other topics that I could do, but maybe I'll have an update on this one. But I've got something in mind, but we'll get to that, later on this year. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to all you folks too for taking some time out of your Tuesday night. I hope you've enjoyed this little talk. I will try to answer your questions as best as I can. I don't have every answer, and a lot of this stuff is still a work in progress. So might not have the answer today, but in the near future, who knows? And I think I can, that is the last slide, and I will get out of this mode here, stop sharing. Thanks very much, folks. Should I start answering questions, or should I just jump in?
Yeah. Hold on, let me unmute.
It is.
There we are. There was a question earlier about from Mike Halpert about were the players paid salaries, have contracts, or was it share of the gate?
Share of the gate from what I found, but that I'm still researching that end of it. I have not come across the actual information for that. I do know that Saul White, this is years later, talked about they lost a lot of money, as players playing for that league. So, but it was very ambiguous. He didn't talk about, if it was contracts or what. So that's, again, to be determined as I, get through this. But yeah, it's a great question. I definitely got to put that on my radar to get an answer to.
Certainly, since if they were having capitalization issues, share of the gate is about the only way they could get some money into the players' hands.
Yeah, Walter Brown wasn't a rich man by any means. He was just a journalist, and journalism pays okay, but it's not, he's not Rockefeller or, what's his name, Nutting, from the Pirates. So if that was the case, it would have folded probably within 10 minutes because he would have financed the team. But that's another story for another day. So sell the team, Bob, so.
Karen, you have a question.
Yes, I do. I was wondering, coming from Pittsburgh and teaching at the University of Pittsburgh, I was wondering, did they have any did anybody have any kind of I'm sorry, did they have anything to back themselves if they had to go? Did they go on strike at all?
The team?
Yeah.
No. They only played for 2 weeks, and essentially, after the games with the Lord Baltimores, the sources kind of go quiet, and then it just pops up, in the newspapers that the whole league is just dead in the water. So no, they didn't go on strike. I mean, maybe some of the other teams may have done something like that. I don't know yet. I haven't gotten beyond the Keystones. I'm still kind of fleshing them out a little bit. But I think somebody wrote something about the Gorhams with a better supplied. That I hate to be the guy with keep saying unknown. I don't know at this point about the Gorhams too much. Just I know their involvement with the Keystones, and yeah. So I would assume they had some cash. If they're traveling down there, they're not getting stuck like the Resolute team from Boston that got marooned in Kentucky. That almost sounds like something out of like the Marx Brothers or the Stooges. Like, how does that even happen? The whole team gets like, stuck down there. And I do believe I read somewhere, and don't quote me on this, but I remember like they had to take jobs as like busboys and dishwashers just to get money to get home. So again, there's probably a movie in there somewhere for somebody, so
the little bit I found out about the Louisville Falls cities, they did work in hotels, or they were in waiters. They worked in laundries. It was not the sort of what you would expect. They tended to live around where the ballpark was, which is the Limerick neighborhood, south of downtown, west of where the first major league park was. It's heavily at the edge of a heavily Irish immigrant neighborhood. But I found, like you did, 3 or 4 guys that you could say, right age.
Mm-hmm.
They gave a first name in the story, and you figure out that's the one. But yeah, there's not much out there on any of these teams because the papers didn't cover them.
No,
and if they lasted a week, it was a long time because they weren't around.
Before I get to the 2 other questions, I did want to throw something out there real quick because I forgot to mention it. So another issue with the Keystones post this league was they didn't stick around just in Pittsburgh. They moved the team over to Steubenville, Ohio, and played out of. They were still called the Keystones, and they were still the Pittsburgh Keystones, but they played out of Steubenville, and they also later on moved the team to Wheeling, West Virginia. I think I did mention that in 1889 they moved the team down there. So again, they're very nomadic too, and Pittsburgh covered a lot of this stuff, but the Wheeling papers and the Ohio papers, I mean, there's stuff there, but it's not to the extent of the Pittsburgh stuff. And it's, again, with paper, it's limited space, so you got to pick and choose. What are you going to put in the paper that's going to interest the most people? And I hate to say it, some of these, these teams just kind of get like 2 or 3 lines. Like, oh yeah, the Keystones took on the Wheeling team from Wheeling, West Virginia. Then the Keystones walked away 10-0. You're like, oh, okay, well that's it. That's all you're going to get.
When you mentioned Peninsula Cemetery and Wheeling, that was divided by the interstate. And for a number of years, Jack Glasscock was missing till they figured out he really wasn't moved. Dixie, you have a question.
I have not really a question, but maybe my proofreading talents can be of service here. Your slide, the one slide just before Walter Brown, says the Southern League of Colored Baseballists, but it doesn't say base, it says ballists.
Oh, did I do it? Oh, sorry about that. Oh, good catch on that one. And no pun intended for the baseball,
Bruce.
Yeah, I was wondering, what did they charge for tickets to these events?
That's a good question too. I don't know the answer to that. I have not found anything for the Keystones that actually came out with an exact price. Yeah, the game to be 1,000 people. I got to think that the game probably wasn't that much money because that's Pittsburgh at that time. That area was the north side, and the areas where the African American community lived were they didn't have a lot of money. So I mean, I can't imagine that it cost too much. But yeah. Oh, and Ajax Jones, I don't want to spend too much time on the cemetery stuff, but back to that cemetery Willie Standard. Ajax Jones is also buried there somewhere in the woods, in the Bramble. It lost. My friend Jaquay Carter, the historian, his great grandmother is buried there as well. But yeah, he can't find her. And those guys weren't originally interred in that cemetery. They were interred in Lincoln Cemetery on the hill. And when they put in Greenleaf Field, they disinterred all those bodies and moved them to that cemetery to build the ball field. So, and the problem is though with that, and again, this is off topic, was there's about 200 headstones that were supposed to be moved, but there was about 2,000 people buried there. So there's now a housing project there. So the big thing is, we got a poltergeist type movie type thing going on. Is there still somebody buried under the housing projects? They don't know. So,
Well, Vince, thank you very much. It's kind of, if you read through some of the comments, it's kind of an interesting lost gem of a story that it's interesting to add new pieces to it, and who knows where that will lead us as we go forward. Thanks again. It was kind of interesting sort of trail down into the early Negro Leagues.
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty fun, and like I said, hopefully in the next couple of years, I eventually will have enough information for a book. The book would be very thin. And
okay, well, Peter, would you like to close us up?
One of the things
tonight?
I do want to try to find is
First of all, Vince, you had many comments that this was a very interesting presentation.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think probably what makes it so interesting is that the awareness among the audience, which was considerable this evening, came to the realization that there's so much more research that can be done. It's going to be painstaking, no doubt. And some of it may be just impossible. But little by little, I think progress will get made. I saw Larry Lester on here this evening, and Larry's somebody who is well versed in this subject. I also saw Jim Overmeyer that was on here earlier, who wrote the book about the Backrack Giants of Atlantic City. And he was with me at Frederick Douglass Cemetery a number of years ago when we dedicated the stone for Saul White's grave. Saul White is the only Hall of Famer buried on Staten Island.
Oh, wow.
So it's a bit of interest. One thing I would say about when I saw Saul White listed on the roster and in your abstract, I was immediately kind of drawn to it because Saul White was buried. He died in a Long Island New York State hospital located on Long Island. He spent his final years from about World War II until the mid-50s. He spent them in New York City area. He wrote for the Amsterdam News for a brief time. What I thought was justice was that Saul White didn't die till 1956. And he was well aware, of course, writing for the Amsterdam News, he was well aware of Jackie Robinson's integration of Major League Baseball, which I thought was, a degree of justice for somebody who was so historically minded and, dedicated so much to our knowledge of early 19th century African American baseball. All right, a couple of just pieces of information for the group here that hung on. Normally, by the end of this week, we'd be sending out our call for abstracts for next year's 19th Century Baseball Speaker Series. They're due around mid-May, and they remain due about mid-May, but they've been delayed being sent a few weeks because we just sent a call for abstracts, and we'll get another one tomorrow right from SABR. For what we're doing is a 19th Century Baseball Symposium for Northern New Jersey in May. And you'll see that coming out to you, both the announcement to save the date, if you haven't received it already, and also a call for abstracts for that event. So I hope you all take a look at it and consider throwing your hat in the ring.
Peter,
But
Peter,
then we'll be out with our 19th century around March 9th, I think, or something, or March 5th.
yeah,
Also, we have coming up next speaker series on the 10th of March. Someone who's here this evening. We have Bruce Alderweireld. Alderweireld is going to be doing a presentation on, I'll read it right here, the White Stockings, Chicago's first champions, the team of 1870. So that'll be surely interesting. And Mike Harpert, who is here also tonight, will be doing in April a discussion of a book that has to do with the Louisville team of 1877 and calls into question of their suspensions. And that book does. And we'll also have in a couple of weeks Matt Albertson doing the biography of Ed Delahanty by Jerry Caswell. So look forward to seeing you all there. Vince, again, a great job tonight. And, hope to see you again soon. And you got to get your hat in there, you know. All right. Bob, anything else?
no, I just, as you said, the call for abstracts for the speaker series next year will come out early to mid March. Deadline will be somewhere in mid-May, something on that order. And we've also got the North Jersey Symposium looking for abstracts. That's going to be a Zoom meeting. So just because you don't live in New Jersey, if you've got a story,
that's a national program.
it.
It'll be done by Zoom, by the way. It'll be in November. And it is there's a couple of very big surprises in that program. So we look forward to seeing you all there. Okay.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a good night. And
okay, thank you all.
Spring training is about to unfold.
Good night now. Thanks again, dude.
See you guys. Bye.